think about the Lord's Prayer. And, it says, help me forgive other people as you've forgiven me. I mean, in the Lord's Prayer, to put that in there, like, you're going to need to be able to forgive people. I think it's a constant reminder that it's not a one time. And I think, the enemy wants us to live in pain, because when we live in pain, we're victims to life. And when we're victims, we're not victorious. And so if the enemy can't get us to believe lies or to spew lies or to hurt others, he'll use resentment like a bruise where he just consistently hits that thing over and over. Yeah. And I sometimes think that, and you talked about the root, but I sometimes think it's when we try to go, I'm done, it's okay, no big deal. And we don't actually just say, like, this is horrible and I hate this and I don't want to live with this. Yeah. And we just sit in that for a minute and actually just accept that this is tragic and we hate this. And then, okay, Holy Spirit, show me how to rewrite this. We're talking about emotional health, how to know how to navigate your emotions in a healthy way, in a healthy spiritual way. And we've had an incredible month. I hope you guys have gone back and checked out some of the other episodes. We had Jeanette Zent, who talked all about decoding your emotions and really practical guides to that. We had Wendy Backlund here. She talked about overcoming emotional bondage and when we can get stuck in emotions. It was powerful. And we also had just an episode where I talked about being emotionally healthy as a spiritual person, but I love this topic. And we figured for the end of this series, I would not do it alone. I would invite my favorite person, Caitlin Zick, to be here. She obviously directs our Truth Academy. She's a pastor herself, but more importantly, a friend. And we're going to have a different type of podcast today.
Yes, this is a fun one. So we're wrapping up the month, y'all, with Ask Anything. So you guys sent in your questions on Instagram and YouTube, and you're like, this is what I still want to know about emotional health. So it's super fun. Keep your eye out on Instagram, YouTube for the next opportunity where you can ask anything, because that's what we do on this podcast. It's so fun. So we're just going to like rapid fire ask Havilah all of the questions.
I have not seen these questions.
No, you haven't.
I just want everyone to know this is off the cuff.
Yes, I love it. So, and if I say your name wrong, I'm so sorry. You can DM us later about it. Okay, so Clara sent in this question. She said, I would love some tips for emotional health when navigating transitions and building new community.
It's a great question. Mm-hmm. So, I think it's important to understand that any new environment requires new tools. It's just like being a parent. Like, it's not the same with one kid and you have 2 kids and 3 kids. You and I both have 4 kids. Every single time it requires a different set of rules, a different set of circumstances, require kind of an ability to navigate. So I always say the first thing you want to really think about is, if this is a new environment, I don't have to be an expert. I always find that my anxiety goes up the moment I'm like, why isn't this working? Why is this so hard? And I realize it's usually because I think I'm supposed to be an expert. I think I'm supposed to know what to do. I almost think like, oh, it's just another thing. Add one more kid in the mix. And I miss the fact that it changed the entire system. And so I think it's important that you take a step back. At least this is what I try to do, is I take a step back and I let myself off the hook. I'm not an expert. I don't have to be. Number 2, I've never been here before, and I might need to ask someone for help because I maybe can't get through this on my own. And then also, I think this ability for us to give ourselves permission for time. Like, it takes me at least a year to get into a groove when I'm in somewhere totally new and I don't know where my relationships are and I don't know where my kids are going here or whatever. And so I give myself time. But I'll say this, I give myself time, but I'm very aware that I can get stuck. And I have been, without being totally aware, I've gotten stuck. And I realize I'm only feeling the lows and the difficulty of this season and none of the highs. And that's when I know I need help. So usually it's like I do trust I'll get through it, but I don't stay on autopilot and just go, it's going to be fine, because I'm aware of my vulnerability to it. And then I start to also find out, is my emotions realistic to what's happening? So, my husband might go, you're being ridiculous, but he's not my watering, he's not my level. He's got his own experience. If I talk to you're my obviously friend, I have 4 kids. We've done a lot of things similarly. And you're like, really? Have you thought about this? Or, oh, that'd be horrible. It'd be hard. Then it normalizes it. And so I think it's also good to find out what's normal or what is maybe over functioning and go get some help. I think new environments also can sometimes bring up emotions that we never dealt with in the past.
Oh,
you know?
So
and
good.
so I remember even in my friendships, I had some pain from my past friendships, and I found my anxiety was with new friendships. This is years ago, and realizing it has nothing to do with what they're doing. I'm stuck in a groove that I never dealt with something over here, and I have to actually rewrite that part of the story.
That's so
good. Those are things. I'm not an expert. I can take all the time I need, but I am also going to be alert that I'm not stuck. And then I'm also going to find a realistic person to measure if this is normal or not normal. And I think that's really part of it. And then also identify the root, which is kind of what Jenna and I went through. If you guys go back to the podcast, you'll see Jenna and I went back into the root of that emotion.
Oh,
so yeah, go find that out.
That's super helpful.
What about you? What do you do?
I think that's so good. The barometer thing is super helpful. Like having somebody, so we've both transitioned here. So we've done this before. And I'm actually helping a friend who just transitioned. And, you know, the statement of, oh, well, I thought I would have found friends already, you know, and it's like, wait. You have to give yourself time. And what's so hard is it's almost like dating again, but you're like a full grown adult. And if you're the new one, everybody else already has their people. So you're like, where am I going to fit? And so you have to give yourself time. But I found for myself, I just had to make myself vulnerable, knowing that it might not be the person or the people, but it's worth the experience or it's worth trying. And so it's super vulnerable. And you're like, I feel like I'm in junior high again. Like what's happening right now? You do. And that's okay. So if you can have a barometer, like you're mentioning, of maybe a really good friend that has known you and you have lots of history with, then it's that helpful voice to be like, yeah, it's going to feel that way. Like, but I'm proud of you for going to that event, or I'm proud of you for asking them to coffee. And you're on a roller coaster for sure.
Yeah, I think they said statistically it takes 2 years for it to feel normal wherever you are. So I always know it's helpful. 2 years if the kids are in a new school, 2 years if I change a house, 2 years. It's not like I can't feel like I'm at home, but it's that realization that I remember moving somewhere. It's like, where do I park? You know, you have, those kind of things where you're like, oh, I got to check the kids in. Every little thing is
Everything is new. I remember I'm moving here and asking you where to get my nails done.
Yes.
But the first place you sent me I was like, is this all Reading has to offer? There's got to be more. Hey, we've got some improvements lately.
Now I know you. I probably wouldn't have seen you there. Yeah.
But you have to have those people that you're like, I can just ask, oh, I went to Safeway. And they're like, actually, that's unsafeway. Like, you've got to have some people that you're feeling out that stuff with.
And then I always tried to reconnect with friends that knew me, like that weren't in town.
Yes.
Like, it's okay to call my old friend and just be like, I need a conversation. I'm not having to explain who I am, where I came from, what I'm doing, all those.
Yeah, you got to stay connected.
Yes.
I love that.
Great question.
Okay, this is a great question as well. Totally different direction. I believe her name is Andressa. Beautiful name. How are emotions connected with a lack of hormonal balance? And then continuing the question to say even how to maintain emotions during a perimenopause stage of life.
Yes. Well, being so far from menopause, I would have no idea because I'm in my 20s. No, it's a great question. I don't think I understood how much your hormones do affect your body until I was with postpartum depression. And when she said depression, I was like, oh, it's a spiritual issue. Like, I've got depression, And she was like, no, you just don't have any serotonin. You have none of the good hormone that's in your body that you need. And then I started realizing how many times in my life did I feel this way and didn't recognize it, thought it was a spiritual thing, would cry my way through it, and then obviously get through it, but realizing that it's like a hormonal thing. So I think it's really important, a few things. I think it's always good to get a checkup.
Yeah.
Even when I ever talk to anybody who has anxiety, depression, like a crippling depression, or they feel overwhelmed or panic attacks, I'm always like, just go get a checkup because your system, God created our bodies to tell us things. Mm-hmm. And so pain is a sign. I think feelings can be signs at times. And then also it can relieve some of that part of you that you didn't know. Like, I have one friend that was always tired, and she's a high energy person. And she had no iron, and she didn't know that. So she was beating herself up. Like, what's going on? I can't get it together. And she was so depleted. She was dangerously depleted in her iron. But because she'd always been a healthy person, what did it matter? And so I think it's really good to start there. And then I think it's really good also to know yourself. So I have to go back to, is this how I've always been? Or is this something new? So in my like obviously in my season of life, I'm definitely starting to feel the perimenopause hormones. And I'm no expert. Everyone knows there's great doctors out there. And there's a lot of information. And to be honest, the more I read, the more I feel like there's a lot of information.
Yeah, you're like,
and
which way do I go?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just glad we're talking about it.
Yeah.
My mom went through the change and you just never knew it. It was just, I just remember looking over and she was sweating and then, she just never really talked about it. So I would say it's really good to know what's your normal. So that way, if there is something that's off, and I did the dangerous thing of telling my husband, like, I think I'm dealing with some hormonal things. And so now he asked me, are you going to get checked? Have you got that? I'm like, okay, stop asking. I'll let you know. But I just think that, again, this is just my opinion, but I do think the enemy likes to take things that can have a solution and just wear us out by not finding it. Right? So it's like, just wear you out. So you don't get good sleep. It's like, if you just kind of hit it practically, I think sometimes I remember someone saying the most spiritual thing you can do is get a good night's sleep. Yeah. So I would just say, I'm not the expert in it, but for me personally, I'm aware it's coming and I'm aware that I'm going to need more treatment as I go. And it was almost like, when I got pregnant with our first son, I had no idea about hormones. And then second, third, fourth. So now when I meet moms on the road that have just had a baby or they're even 6 months out, I will ask, how's your postpartum? Are you okay? And it's pretty often I'll get a mom that's her eyes will fill up with tears and she will say, I'm having a hard time. And I'm able to ask her questions. Have you gone to the doctor? Have you got any blood work? It's totally normal. Or, you're worth taking a little bit of curiosity to figure it out. Yeah. So I think it's really good to not be offended at like, why is my body, but to be curious. And then also find other women that are in your season. Totally. Because that's another thing where we can text each other and go, this is unbelievable. And that helps. Having a twin does help too. Because I can be like, is this our childhood or is this our bodies? I don't know.
Which one is it? Oh, okay. Yep. So good. Okay, here we go. Sarah asked, this is a great tie-in. Best ways to stay emotionally healthy when you're a mom to littles.
Oh, isn't it? It's so intense. Being a mom of littles is so intense. And if you are a deep feeling person, I don't know how people do it. I don't, because it triggers everything too. It triggers your childhood. It triggers the mom you think you were going to be, the mom you want to be. Yeah. It's just so intense on every level. Yeah. And it's one of those things where your kids are, they're all yours. They're your responsibility. And then if you start adding on the like, I own their childhood and I own if they're going to be a good human and then if they're going to love God, and it just can feel overwhelming. And so I think for me, one of the things I had to really regulate was making sure that I got enough sleep and that I was honestly having balance with my physical body, my spiritual, and my soul, my mind, will, emotions, and having some balance. Yeah. And so I think what I found is that if I wasn't being healthy, if I was exhausted, I was overly emotional about this. Or if I was, I was just busy, but I wasn't having any connection with the Holy Spirit, then I didn't do well. So I would say those are really good things, but the number one thing that helped me as a mom of littles to regulate my emotions was finding a group of young moms and being able to be myself with them and just listen to them and let me share what was going on with me. And one of those groups was an actual inner psychologist, like a group that I joined and paid for. And another one was, it used to be called Raising Tomorrow's Leaders. And I sat in that group. And those were significant moments for me as a mom because I looked to Ben to solve all my problems. Like Ben's going to be, he's going to date me. He's going to, mate me. He's going to do all these things. And then realizing that even though he's done everything with me, he did not have a baby. Yeah. And I think only women know what it's like to give birth and to feed the baby and to and have yourself and all the things. So I think a mom's group, some kind of support group. We always give it to addicts and we go, addicts need support groups and, people that, and I'm like, no, I think the whole world needs support groups. We have weight loss groups. And I'm like I wish I would have done that earlier in my life, is understood the power of a support group, It's significant.
So good.
Yeah. What about you? What did you do?
For me, that was huge too. So I would say there was 2 for me. One was definitely connection. For me, I found it actually, we felt it was like a group of us women that were in the same stage, which that's hard if you're the first in your group to have babies. And then, or if you're the last, like it really matters to have people in the same season. So your friend groups might change a little bit, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you're not with these people, but you need people that understand
exactly right.
and can validate and not be like, wait, why can't you go out at 9? You're like, are you kidding? Like, so we just did, and I totally encourage women to do this if you're in that season. We had a weekly play date, but there was 4 to 8 of us. So you only planned once every other month. And you didn't do anything. You just showed up. It's not like you cleaned your house. You went to the park. But all we did is we just put it together so that at least once a week there was something to get out of the house and just be able to kind of commiserate, encourage, and for your kids to grow up together. But it was so low stakes. Come a mess, come with spit up on you, come without brushing your teeth, come with your 3rd cup of coffee, and really connect. And it turned into a later group that we like, kind of like a MOPS type group where we really grew together, and then we reached more women. But it just started with the play date. And that was it was my lifeline.
It's like so practical.
And like a group text, like my kid pooped in the little pool again, and now my other son was eating it. You know, you're like, I need somebody besides my husband. I don't want to be blowing up his phone. And then the validation, because I think as a mom, everything you do all day just gets undone.
I know.
I did the dishes. I did the laundry. It's all undone. Like your husband comes home, you're like, but I did do like 20 million things today. It just doesn't look like it. And then the second would be an outlet. Like I had to find an outlet for what I was passionate about. So for me, it was preaching, teaching, writing.
True.
So I started a girls' Bible study on Sunday mornings. I'm like, I can take my kids to Sunday school still do this class for girls, or write a blog, or if you want to post on Instagram. Like, what is your outlet of something that's creative? Like I know you love to paint and be creative. So what is that, and making sure you find time for it and prioritize it, because it's huge
brilliant
for your emotions.
I have a friend that she liked dancing. She'd go to a dance class, or another friend that loved the gym, and she would just do one, but it just was that one hour thing, or whatever. Yep. I love that. I think the thing you said about finding women that are in the same season as you, that was so tricky. Yeah. Because I was a mom I was in my late 20s, and a lot of the moms were in their early 20s. And so here I was, they weren't my friends initially, but when you have the same age, you just end up being together. Yeah. And there's nothing more frustrating than you trying to keep the same friends and explaining to them why you have to be gone by 7:30 and why. And so I think those not having to explain yourself in that season is really important when you get those friends. Again, you keep your other ones, but that was critical. Yep. And then if you have 1 kid and then 2 kids, it's a whole different group of friends. Yes. And then 3 kids. And then people that have older kids. Like, it's really funny. You're constantly shifting friendships. 100%. And then boys or girls. Like, once they get to the cooties age, they don't want to hang out with. Those are your friends, not my friends. No, I'm like, wait, what? They were your friends. I have to start over for you and find boy moms. You know, it's true. That's really true. Yeah. Yeah. So you just got to move with it and find people. Yep. I agree with you. I love it. Love that question. Okay, okay, wait, I'm going to skip to this one. This is good. This one came from Anfuso family. It must be a family member of yours. All right. They said, how to counteract resentment. Isn't that hard? Yeah. How to you know what? Resentment. It's like a bitter root for sure. You just have to find the root, which is probably what y'all talked about. Let's talk about that, Kate, for a minute. I mean, to find the root of the resentment is where you have to start, right? You have to figure out what is the root of why am I feeling resentment and what's the trigger to it. Because for sure, it's like you're probably putting something on somebody else that really there's something going on inside of you. So it's obviously hard to answer without a bunch of backstory, but I think just finding what the root is how you can know what to do the opposite of. When I find myself getting bitter or resentful, I normally have to turn to gratitude, where I'm like, God, show me the good. Show me this is what I have. I'm normally repenting. Like, I'm sorry for feeling this way. I'm sorry for this coming up. Ooh, that was ugly. And really just going to him and saying, I need your help. Because I feel like resentment's not normally in your face. Somebody's not like, what'd you do? Why'd you feel like, why'd you act like this? It's normally when I'm driving the car and the Holy Spirit's like, hey, remember that? I'm like, oh yeah, that wasn't pretty. No. Okay. So I think finding the root, and because for me too, it's those Holy Spirit moments where you're like, oh, I keep feeling this way. Maybe the same person, the same situation, the same thing. So you have to find the root to be able to deal with resentment, or you'll actually probably validate it and it'll just become a norm for you, a new pattern. It's so true. Yeah. And I think about, even if you know the root, like something that we've done, and I know you have done this as well, is like actually going into that moment and inviting Jesus in that moment and letting him tell you how to resolve that. I talked about this, I'm talking about this on a podcast coming up, But I remember my dad telling me this story of this spiritual father that had really hurt him. And he had no real like healthy natural dad. And then he had his spiritual dad hurt him. And I mean, he could even call God father for the first season of his spiritual life. Finally called him father. Spiritual father hurts him. And he said it was decades. He just had this pain at what this man had done until finally he had a dream one night. And the dream was that man coming to him. And he thought they were going to have this conversation. They're going to talk it through. But he said, all I remember is he reached out and hugged me, and I hugged him back. And he said, I started to cry. And the man said, it doesn't matter anymore. It's okay. It doesn't matter anymore. And he said he wasn't like saying it's no big deal, but it was almost just like, you can put it to bed. Like, it's okay. And my dad said he woke up from the dream crying, but he said, I felt released as well.
Wow.
And I just think there's something supernatural that we can't always resolve. But I do think, think about the Lord's Prayer. And it says, help me forgive other people as you've forgiven me. I mean, in the Lord's Prayer, to put that in there, like, you're going to need to be able to forgive people. I think it's a constant reminder that it's not a one time. And I think, the enemy wants us to live in pain, because when we live in pain, we're victims to life. And when we're victims, we're not victorious. And so if the enemy can't get us to believe lies or to spew lies or to hurt others, he'll use resentment like a bruise where he just consistently hits that thing over and over. Yeah. And I sometimes think that and you talked about the root, but I sometimes think it's when we try to go, I'm done, it's okay, no big deal. And we don't actually just say like, this is horrible and I hate this and I don't want to live with this. Yeah. And we just we just sit in that for a minute and actually just accept that this is tragic and we hate this. And then, okay, Holy Spirit, show me how to rewrite this. But does that make sense? Like, I think there's this part of us that if you couple resentment with shame, you'll never get out. It's like it just holds you under. Yep. But to realize that, I think we get into resentment when we often want to punish the person that hurt us. Yes. Or we don't actually feel validated that we were in pain. Like, we didn't get validated. There's something in us that didn't feel validated. So we have this thing that we can't let go of because there was something in us that really needed a need that needed to be met, but didn't get met. And so we just kind of feel like stuck. And we're that little girl or that little boy inside going, I had a need and I got hurt and I needed someone to help me in this and nobody helped me. Right. And I think it's okay. And I just think that a lot of times, like I said, we spiral into, I should know better. I've been over this. I've thought about this. I've prayed about this. What's the problem? And yet I think about Paul. He prayed for the thorn to go away 3 times. Can some of these situations be thorns? Can they be things that we keep us humble, but also cause us to go to Christ over and over? Yeah. We want to be free from things, but I would not look at it as there's something wrong with you. Your faith isn't working. Right. I would say if Apostle Paul, who wrote 2/3 of the New Testament, said he couldn't get rid of something, and the Bible said, he said it in scripture, but my strength will be made known in your weakness. Could that possibly be the resentment as well? Again, I don't know. If you need to forgive. Yeah. Yes, we have to forgive, and that's a process. But I wonder somewhat if it's resentment or if it's just pain that is just, it's a thorn that won't go away. Yeah. Unresolved. I don't know. Unresolved. Yeah. I love it. Conversations we could never have.
Hav's good off the cuff, guys. This is incredible stuff here. Okay, so Sarah asked, this is a great one. How do you know if you need counseling? You've done it before and you felt done, but how do you know like if something comes up and you need it again?
Ooh, that's a good question. And you and I could probably both answer this. For me, we talked about this in the beginning of the podcast, but I have to create my normals first. So until I know what's normal for Havilah, like if I'm hormonal once a month, then I know, oh, this is my crazy 24 hours. Great. If I'm weepy about a certain situation, then that's how I know that's normal. So I have to have my normals first. And once I know my normals, and sometimes you'll think you're going crazy and then you'll realize, oh wait, this happened a month ago, or that happened last time this person said this. So it's really good to start being an expert in yourself to know that's what triggers me. That's kind of normal for me. But then once you know what your normals are, then you can know when it's not normal. And then that's when I would start to ask the question, do I need counseling or do I need coaching? Do I need more creativity? Or, like what's going on? Because I think a lot of us think counseling's the one way. And I'm like, it could be, but there's also different types of counselors. Yeah. And there's trauma counselors and there's kind of life coach counseling. And then there's just life coaches that kind of take you through. And so My question would be, is there something that you need healed? Then I would definitely talk to somebody, like either get prayer ministry or deliverance or whatever that might be.
Yeah.
But if it's something where you're stuck, I sometimes think if you did therapy and it was great, but you don't know what it is, I would even start on the, maybe I need to be coached and don't go into, I need to go to my past. Maybe I actually need to focus on my future, and I'm not. It's easier for me to go in my past and sit and talk about my past than to go in my future.
Oh,
so ask yourself that, because I think that can be really critical.
That is
and
so
either
good.
Right? Either way. But again, for me at least, it's usually somebody closest to me that says, I think you should go see somebody.
Yeah.
And I want to punch them when they say it, because I'm like, I'm fine. I'm great. But the truth is, I know that they're right. And now I've learned to not take it personal and to go, you know what, you're probably right.
Yeah.
I need to go see somebody and not be afraid of that. But I think that is really critical. I also learned, which I didn't really even know this, that the same counselor you had in the past may not be the one you need to see today. So that's really different too. Like just like a doctor, they have different skills.
Yeah.
And so I found myself, I have this fantastic counselor that a lot of us have seen, and she's incredible. But I realized I actually need somebody more on the clinical side. I want to know what this is. And it actually led me to getting diagnosed with ADHD. But that was the journey I wanted to go on, where I knew this therapist, that was not her expertise, but this therapist was.
Wow.
So I could go to her and say, okay, with your expertise, does this sound like, and yes, you should go get tested. Okay, great. So you kind of have to be an expert in that as well. But I don't know. What about you?
I mean, I totally agree. Different types of counseling or coaching for different reasons and seasons. For me, same mentioned counselor that we've been to, like, helped me through mom and dad stuff, like parenting stuff, family stuff that I needed help with. And she was perfect for it. But then when I knew I needed like some EMDR to go into stuff, just different trauma triggers that were happening inside of my body, I know that's not the right person. So being willing to know that, or being educated enough, I didn't know for years, it would have saved me a lot of time. So knowing that was super helpful, but also getting over that hump of, I have to do this again, and like having any of that. Like, as you said it, I was giggling to myself because I was thinking, if only we could think of it as like a spa for our soul. Like, can we have some cucumbers for our eyes and some aromatherapy or something while we do this? Because that's really what it is. Like, I would always leave feeling better, but I would hate the going there, So I'm like, I know I'm going to leave in such a healthier state with so much healing. But I think all of your tips of identifying how and when you need it is really, really helpful. Yeah,
I agree with you. You never want to do it. Yeah. Initially, it's like, oh, here we go. Yeah. But it is, I agree with you. Yep. Knowing like, okay, this is going to be better in the long run. It's like a gym.
Yes,
but really sometimes what's helped me is I just have to kind of act like it's a coach. Because if it's just about inner healing, I will start to get anxious about that. But if it's just, you know what, this is just a coaching session. We're just going to get through this.
Yes.
But yeah, it's very important. I think it is. And it's very important. A lot of people that I talk to, they get stuck on certain things. And I'm like, if you just would go see somebody for an hour, like you could really resolve some of this and get your power back. I just see that they're stuck and there's just this it's almost like they think only people that are in really bad place, they're the ones that need to get therapy, or they have a terrible childhood, and I'm like, it's not that at all. Yeah. It's really about asking for help.
Yes.
And seeking out help.
Yeah. And when you do the coaching perspective, which different sessions when I've gone for that, I'm like, yeah, I'm excited. Like, come on, let's go. I'm ready. Help me. So yeah, it just depends on what you're having to do. If you're feeling like I'm digging up heavy stuff, it makes it a little harder. But if you're like, I'm going because I need to get better and I need to get out of this rut I'm in, then you're like, I can do this.
Yeah. I was thinking about this conversation I had recently with this beautiful woman, and she was telling me that she was considering going to therapy again, and was asking for a Christian therapist, and yet she was really hesitant because she was saying, I've come so far in my life, I don't know if I want to go back, and then like, what's my problem? Like, I'm scared to ask these questions that are kind of ruminating, and I just said to her, this is not who you are. Like your life, like you've got to give yourself some credit. Like you've been a single mom. You have made incredible choices along the way. You're brilliant. You're beautiful. Like you are an amazing woman. I've known you for a couple years. This is not your pattern. So the fact that you need a little help in this moment tells me this is legitimate, and actually you're worthy of that. And this was me, but I said, I think you should just get it over with. Like, let's just deal with this. This doesn't have to be this huge where you don't know what's going on. Like, just go see somebody. And then they'll tell you, yeah, we need to see more.
100%,
But to self-diagnose, and I remember reading this study where they said it is almost impossible for you to self-diagnose.
Oh, yeah.
Which is crazy, right? Because we go, oh, it must be my child. It must be my mom. It must be my dad. It must be my, and they said it's impossible. You don't actually know. But there was that part of her that was feeling like almost like ashamed, like, are we really doing this again? And I think that's really important for people, that even if you're going to go back to therapy or back to counseling or even marriage counseling, you're at a different place.
Yeah.
Don't relive the past. You're
Right.
allowed to have counseling at this moment, at this time. And don't label it as failure.
Yeah,
it's not.
That's so good. It's not one and done.
It's not one and done. No, and you're not
Super
you're not
helpful.
repeating history.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so
Very
good.
important.
This is good and kind of in the same line. Chloe asked, how do I get out of my head overthinking, repeatedly thinking of one thing and just getting stuck in ruts?
Well, there's a payoff somewhere.
Hmm.
I think about when we repeat something over and over and over, it becomes comfortable, even if we don't like it.
Wow.
Right? So there's something in it to where, at least there's something in it where I don't mean a good payoff. I just mean there's something in it where we're in a groove. And so just like if you were addicted to sugar, you'd have to begin to break that. You can't just say, I'm not going to eat sugar. I'm not going to eat sugar. You're going to have to probably set up where you throw your sugar out, and you're going to go through some withdrawals, and you're going to think about it, and you're going to think, let's go get donuts. You're going to have this craving, but it's going to take rewiring a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I think being curious about the root, but I also think sometimes there are people that I know this of myself. I want to change this, but I don't like that I have that. And I'm embarrassed that I think that, or I'm embarrassed that I do that, but I don't want to do the work to change it.
Yeah, but it's comfortable.
It's comfortable, and it's like the person I think I should be would never deal with that or think that. And so I kind of get in this thing of like, instead of being like, yeah, this is me, it's like, oh, I shouldn't watch TV. I shouldn't watch TV. I shouldn't watch TV. But you're a TV watcher. Like, stop acting like I shouldn't watch TV and just admit it, and then put boundaries around it rather than I shouldn't. So I think there are certain things. I also think that if you're stuck in an area, sometimes, remember when I had the pain in my neck, not just my kids, real pain. My physical therapist has said to me, where your pain is most often not the root of where it's coming from. And I was like, oh no, it's on my left side. It's right here. She goes, no, that's not it at all. In fact, she goes, it's going to take a season to figure out where it is. And I would just say a lot of us try to fix a thought or an action, and we have to actually go a little deeper to figure out where that came from, because that's the only way to change it. And I think Wendy Backlund and I talked a little bit about that.
Okay,
but
great.
My question is, if you're thinking about it over and over obsessively, maybe it's something else. Maybe it's not even related to that, and you're just stuck on that one thought.
Yeah, that's super good.
Yeah.
This is a good one. You've kind of even brought it up, and this one's from Sheila. Sheila said, how real is ADHD, and how does it fit in with emotional health as a Christian and like in a Christian walk?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not a licensed clinical therapist or psychologist or psychiatrist. It's very real. I think it's very real. And I think just as autism would be real, or being dyslexic, which I am, I think these are very real things. People have unique elements to their brain. And I look at it as there are certain things that I have to work harder at, but it doesn't mean that truth isn't truth and that I can't live the abundant life. I just have to work at it differently. So I would say for any of us, if you have OCD, right, and you're dealing with kind of a chronic OCD, sure, you could go after it in prayer and say, okay, I want to get rid of this. But what I have found is, Lord, when you want to heal that or release me from that, I want you to. But until then, I'm going to do the work to live the abundant life you've called me to. So I'm going to set up things around me to build that health in my life. So for me, with adult, ADHD, there was a whole group of, what I found was there was a whole group of women that were undiagnosed that are about my age, that back in the day when they first started diagnosing, they would diagnose little boys because they were hyperactive. They had a lot of energy. Well, women, that's not how it happens. Actually, we're more spacey, and we're a little bit more creative, and our brains are other places. And so for me, they said that, and one of the reasons I even got diagnosed was I had chronic migraines, and I had low level depression. I wasn't depressed, but I would feel this sense of defeat. And I did a ton of research, and I like to research I don't know if anyone listening on here likes to research. I love to research. And I found that there was a study that was done that women in my world that like my age that had migraines and low-level depression were linked to undiagnosed ADHD, which is wild because the migraines, your brain, and then also the depression, discouragement linked to not being able to finish things and complete things and forget things. And so what I had to find out was if I had just treated my depression as depression rather than understanding it was linked to a deficiency or a uniqueness, I should say, in the way that my brain worked, it gave me permission to say, I'm not depressed. It's just how my brain works. So I have to be aware of this and give myself compassion, but also be aware that I'm probably going to have to deal with some discouragement that other friends don't. I'm probably going to have to deal with a little bit of embarrassment because I'm late or I forgot something or I didn't finish that. And that's embarrassing. And I don't like that, but I have to give myself permission to be flawed.
Yes.
And so I would say we don't partner with weakness. We don't say, well, that's who I am. Sorry.
Right.
No, I'm trying to do the best I can, but I'm also not going to ignore it either. So it's this really fine line between God, heal me, set me free, but also you may be this way, so I don't need you to change it if you don't want to change it, but I'm going to give you glory. I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to be okay with being flawed, and I'm going to move forward. So I think for anyone, right, I think it's really important and that everything we have, whether you're chronically ill, you have chronic pain, whether you have whatever it might be, there is emotions linked to those flaws. So to be willing to acknowledge what is that emotion that's most linked to the flaw that I might have, whether it be, I gain weight easy and again, that's not a flaw. I'm just simply saying that it could be something that bothers you, right? Yeah. It could be mine's obviously learning disabilities. It could be anything, but there's an emotion linked to that. So whatever that is, instead of going, I can't have this, being healthy and emotional maturity is actually being able to just recognize what it is and then put a system in place to deal with that at that moment, not spiral or cycle.
So good.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I think that's
good.
what healthy emotional spiritual maturity is. It's not just praying your way through it and going, it's fine, but having I think admitting it. I think I see people that just don't admit it. Yeah. I don't admit that I feel full of shame because this isn't working. I don't admit this. And then secondly, I have a system or a practice in place or a ritual that allows me to be flawed but to move through it quickly rather than getting stuck.
So good.
It sounds much easier than it is. And
it'll take some time.
That, I'm like,
and
that's not true. Like this is from decades of work. Like, Lord help me. Yeah.
So good.
You want to fix it.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important. Our emotions are a gift from God. The Bible's very clear. Like our emotions are gifts. They're not to just lead our lives. They're there to signal what needs attention, what needs the Holy Spirit's help, how relationally connect to others. So they are a gift. So don't demonize them, but also let your spirit lead you. Don't let your emotions lead you.
Yes.
And let your emotions get healed and whole so they can be a counterpart, a beautiful interaction, just like the Trinity, body, soul, and spirit to interact in a supernatural way.
Mic drop. We'll end with this last question because it's a good one. It's just from Martha, and she just said, I absolutely need to get emotionally healthy. Is there any book or course or anything that you've read or recommend?
Well, Wendy Backlund was on here,
yes,
and she has Victorious Emotions, which is brilliant, and you can find that on our Bethel bookstore. Emotional, healthy spirituality. I think it's Pete Scazzaro. It was brilliant. I've listened to it a couple times.
It's so good. I started following him on Instagram too, and he has lots of good.
Say it again.
Emotionally healthy spirituality. I'm pretty sure that's the exact title.
I think that was brilliant. I also think Jenny Allen has a book about emotions.
Get Out of Your Head?
Yeah.
Or
I think that was
there's a new one.
There's a new one.
There's a new one about emotions.
Yeah, about emotions. And she's always great.
Yeah.
And also Lisa Turkhurst. Anything Lisa does, she's always excellent with, she brings the word in. But those are what I would recommend.
Awesome.
And I think we'll get more books on emotions. I think we're just getting started on some of that. But yeah, great questions.
Yeah, you guys, you did great.
This
you asked
one of my
anything.
favorite series. I'm emotional. I'm like, this is one of my favorites for sure. I'm kind of like,
yeah,
do something
coming
else.
to an end.
Yes, I love it. Maybe because I live in a house of boys.
Yes,
I'm like, let's talk about emotions.
Awesome,
it's been great. Yeah. You guys, thanks for being here today. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. Kate, you're always amazing, and you guys. I hope that you've loved this series. In fact, if you have, would you let us know? I mean, here we are. We're in the darkness of the podcast YouTube world. And sometimes it's hard to know, does this speak to you? Do you like this? And so would you leave us a comment? Would you let us know what you liked? What topic was interesting? Maybe even what guests we've had on that you've enjoyed. We would love to hear that. We're reading them and we're actually making decisions forward by what you guys are telling us. So please let us know what spoke to you. If you're on the podcast, leave us a 5-star review or something in the reviews, a chat, and we will be able to see every single one of those. Most importantly, we love you. And we're so grateful. And I want to say, I'm so proud of you for investing in your life by even listening to this whole podcast about emotional health. I mean, look at you. That is a powerful thing. You should feel very encouraged and proud of yourself. This has been a great series and we're glad you're here and we'll see you next time.